6-6 to start the season in a very slim shot at even making the playoffs, and yet here we are. The Bills, AFC East champs once again. The 2 seed in the postseason once again, coming off a 21-14 win on the road at the dreaded Miami Dolphins. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast.
I'm Jon Scott, unmuted now, and here at Hard Rock Stadium where we kind of saw a little bit of everything. It's funny because I think the game itself, Kevin, was almost a microcosm of this Bills season. It was Josh Allen.
Wait. I literally wrote that down, that I was going to say that to you. Microcosm of the entire season. Go on. You take it.
Josh Allen put them in stupid situations and behind the 8 ball. Josh Allen bailed them out. You have some guys that you counted out and thought were complete wastes on the roster, elevating to the moment and being the catalyst for who ultimately won this football game. And it was the defense once again finding a way and weathering the storm to allow the offense to grind it out and ultimately overcome the miscues that they made themselves, largely Josh Allen. So they had it all. As I'm sure we'll say, we'll throw out the Josh Allen experience once again. And in the end, the Bills are exactly where most of us predicted they would be. The division champs, a high seed, and hosting some playoff games in January.
Unbelievable, John. Of course, the Tennessee Titans took care of the Jaguars earlier in the day. So we knew going into this game that the Bills would have at least one playoff game coming up in the wild card round. But for a team like the Bills, the number 2 seed, very important. You knew that they were going to come out and play for it and play hard for it. They came out, John, and the offense looked really good right off the bat. The beginning of the game was fine until Josh Allen kind of has a misread with Gabe Davis and throws an interception off the start. And that's when things kind of went awry. And then you get to that second quarter, and it's Miami's offense just looked unstoppable there in that second quarter. Then you get to halftime, John, and things turn around because you get a 96-yard punt return from Deontay Hardy. We'll dive through everything, but like you said, this was the season in a nutshell. A team that looked really good, that looks really competitive, then keeps totally beating themselves the entire first half of the game, but is able to turn things around. And then Josh Allen becomes Superman Josh Allen, who in the second half looks like he could carry this team to the Super Bowl himself if he wants to.
I'm looking at the drive charts. First half, you get the great interception by Christian Benford. You're thinking, my goodness, the Bills roll 79 yards down the field. And then Josh Allen throws an interception. Yeah, sure, miscommunication to Gabe Davis, but it was a bad mistake. And then the Bills, once again, force a punt. They get it. They go for it on 4th down. He throws an interception in the end zone. You have to understand in some of these instances, certainly not going for it on 4th down, but just right there, that's 3 points. That's 3 points on that opening drive that whether there was miscommunication or not, it just never looked like it was there. Then the Bills get a touchdown. Lucky, Trent Sherfield was fantastic with a toe tap on the tip. And then Allen makes another complete miscue with poor clock management, throwing it to where they're in the middle of the field with no timeouts, and time expires. That's another 3 points. So you're sitting there at halftime saying they're down 14-7. It should probably be 14 at the very least. And then they come on out and they punt. 8 plays, 19 yards, and you're like, oh, okay, they punt, and there's a fumble in there. Their other drives, so we're looking at their possessions here the first 3 quarters. Offensively, yeah, there's a Deontay Hardy punt return, but you look in there, it's interception, touchdown, poor clock management, punt, fumble with Allen in the red zone, or just outside of it on the 21. Then you get the Dawson Knox touchdown, and then you get what I consider good decisions by McDermott, twice going for it on 3rd down or 4th down One time it doesn't get there, another time it does get there earlier, and then it doesn't at the end. It was all over the place. I mean, frankly, if you look at the Bills' offensive numbers as a whole, 473, it's because Allen put the cape on when he wasn't making mistakes, and ultimately they were able to overcome things here. But it wasn't pretty, but they just found a way, and that's kind of what this 5-game winning streak has been like. It hasn't always been easy. Outside of the Dallas game, it's been a grind. And I think maybe, as opposed to us being critical of them for not winning a certain way, maybe it's time as we shift to the postseason where winning is all that matters to not necessarily care as much about how it's done, but just maybe give them some praise for finding ways to overcome their own mistakes and ultimately beat some good teams when they're not playing their best football.
Yeah, I think that this is going to play a major role going into the postseason, John. We're looking at games where maybe a year ago the Bills were losing close games like this. Now they're winning them, and you can only play the opponent in front of you. And what the Bills have been able to do was they've been able to come back at times and win games, eke out close games. This is what you're going to get when you get to the postseason. I know the Bills have the Steelers up first in the first round, and you can say what you want about the Steelers and how they got into the postseason, but they got into the postseason because they can win games, John. So, I mean, if you're looking at the Bills maybe needing to grind one out against the Steelers, that's more than likely what's going to happen, John. And one of the things that you can take away from this game is Diggs kind of got back on track. He was close to 100 yards receiving. Khalil Shakir continues to rise up. Dalton Kincaid, where you figure he would be on the stat sheet, but getting contributions from other players on offense really going to go a long way for forming this team going into the postseason, because Gabe Davis is banged up, John, and I think Trent Sherfield did an incredible job stepping in for him, and might even say, I mean, I don't know if I'm going out on a limb here, but say if Gabe Davis was still in the game and Trent Sherfield wasn't used as much, maybe we don't have this outcome.
Yeah, I think it's good to see some things here. What I think would be interesting to get your take on is looking back at this run the Bills have been on, 4 straight division titles. You could even go back, I don't want to go back to 17, but obviously the Josh Allen 19, 20, 20, all these years. Do you think this team is better suited for a playoff run now by being battle-tested and the way they've had to rally here late in the season than maybe years past? For me, obviously, I think ideally you'd want it to be like 2021, where they weren't as in deep of a hole, but they still were kind of in dire straits and needed to win a lot of games in December. Did it, but they were doing it in really emphatic style. The Monday night game against the Patriots, or Belichick tosses the tablet and all of that. I mean, you felt better and they looked better. That's what you ideally would want. But I wonder if maybe having to go through these trials and tribulations and fight so hard and frankly win some pretty ugly in games that probably should have never been that close, if that makes it so this team is in the best headspace and they're just prepared and understand maybe better how to win as a team when they don't got their fastball. What do you think about where this run puts them in terms of their preparedness to maybe be at their best at the best part of the year?
So when the Bills come out of the bye week and they all start talking about, we're basically, it's the playoffs for us right now. They basically had to win out. I mean, I think you and I both talked there was some leeway, and it proved to be true thanks to the Tennessee Titans, who actually beat the Dolphins earlier this season, then beat the Jaguars to kind of help the Bills out. But I think when you got around the Cowboys game, you thought maybe that the Bills were coming into form and this was the team they were going to be and they would be able to blow through teams. But I think ideally you want to put the AFC East away early, and we're used to them playing for the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed. But I'm going to agree with what you're saying, or what you're talking about here, is that I think this Bills team, for what they've experienced the final 5 games of the regular season, has them mentally prepared for what lies ahead in the postseason. And cool that they end up getting the home field against the Steelers coming up in the first round. That's all well and good, John, but I just think they've found themselves in situations. If you're going to learn from anything, I mean, it looked like to me Josh Allen and the Bills offense got back on track in the second half of the game in Miami, and maybe they're in a good spot right now heading into the postseason. And I think that with the way last season ended to the Cincinnati Bengals, coupled with what they put themselves through this year, I think they're mentally in a good place heading into the postseason.
I mean, the theme of all of these games that have been close, win and losing, is oftentimes mistakes they're making themselves. I mean, Allen was not great in the first half. I'm pulling up his numbers here. He was 16 of 23, 218, but he had the 2 picks, and of course he had the one touchdown, and he had 4 rushes for 30 yards at that point in time. So not terrible in terms of completion percentage and all that, but it was the turnovers there. He adds a fumble in the second half, but he only had 2 incompletions in the entire second half. He was phenomenal, and obviously running like the big play on 3rd and 12 and that long drive and stuff like that. Some key plays here. I think they need to reel it in better. They need to execute. There were some penalties and things like that. I do think that they need to play better. I mean, I don't think this is a recipe for success to plow through the playoffs, but I do think that they've put themselves in the position for enough learning experiences, I guess, to maybe when they're in all sorts of different situations, know how to claw their way out of it. Okay, we got punched in the mouth by this team. This is what we have to do. Oh, we feel that we should be up 14 on the Steelers, and maybe it's a tight game into the third quarter. They know how to weather that storm as well. I think maybe that's something that will help them. And I think it also has helped that, to what you were talking about a little earlier, different guys stepping up. I mean, yeah, Allen was the Superman of this game, but Khalil Shakir, 6 for 105 on 6 targets. As we talk about, whenever we bring him up, he just maximizes every single opportunity that he has. He had the huge catch in the Los Angeles Chargers game. If he doesn't make that play, maybe they lose that game. The way he's been playing in the Dolphins game, who knows? You're right. To get Diggs back, 7 for 87 on 8 targets, it just looked more like the Stephon Diggs that we've become accustomed to where 7 for 87 is more of like a, oh, okay game. And Josh Allen, if he ever starts connecting on any of these deep balls, the Diggs is open. This is like 2 or 3 weeks in a row. It's a monster game, and maybe the game as a total is different. Dalton Kincaid now back-to-back weeks with 80-plus receiving yards, this on 7 for 84. The recipe for success seems to be there. It's get Diggs involved. It's get Kincaid involved. Maybe you use Shakir, which in this instance it was. I would have liked to see a little bit more from James Cook in the passing game. He obviously dropped a touchdown. The running game really wasn't there, but I think all the pieces are there to where, all right, if you're not getting Alpha 1, Diggs, and Dave, whatever it may be, there are other guys who can step up, and certainly Trent Sherfield was that, and we will have to wait and see about the status of Gabe Davis. Afterwards, I saw him on the sidelines, second half, in street clothes, was walking around okay, but you never know. That'll be an evaluation thing, and some may say, hey, what's the difference if Gabe Davis is out there or not? He's been boom or bust all season. Well, you can't disagree with that, but I do think that he's someone that is important, and you can't just simply say, oh, Trent Sherfield made an awesome catch on a touchdown in a big game. I think we've upgraded here. I don't think that'd be fair to Davis either.
No, I agree with you on that, but Sherfield did come up with some nice catches throughout the game as a whole. Want to go back to James Cook, John, in the run game. We reached a point around the Cowboys win that maybe the Bills' identity right now is to lean on James Cook. I think as the last couple of weeks have played out, I've kind of gone away from that. I've kind of got back to maybe James Cook just had a couple of good games sprinkled in. And, I mean, it is what it is. It's Allen. It's It's Diggs. It's now Kincaid. Dawson Knox gets himself a touchdown. I'm not saying that you bail on James Cook right now, but I just thought with how this game played, with how the Patriots game played out, I think we're seeing more and more of this Bills team that it's not James Cook. It is still Allen. It is still Diggs. James Cook is a nice complementary player, but I think when you had Diggs as number one playmaker, James Cook number two, I've kind of shifted away from that to bring in Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir more and keep this passing game rolling.
I would say I think the running game needs to be the complementary piece. And it seemed, and we discussed maybe that had something to do with the Diggs usage of sorts in terms of snap counts and whatnot, that maybe the Bills were shifting more into the run just in total for their identity, bringing the scale closer to even. To me, Josh Allen throwing it 38 times in a game that you have to win and then running it 15 times, yeah, I'm good with that. James Cook running it 13 to 15 times, I'm okay with that. He only got 36 yards. It was tough sledding. He had 14 yards on one carry. So if you take that away, it's 12 for 22. So it's hard. Dolphins, not a bad front, even though they're missing their pass rushers. They have some good players out there. But to me, the running game should always be something that is a secondary thing, something that sets up and plays off of the passing game. Because you got to keep teams honest. You can't just sling it back there and completely abandon the run. I do still think, though, James Cook as an offensive weapon is someone that needs to touch the ball 15-plus times a game, and I like it when he gets involved in the passing game. The touchdown was there. He just dropped it. And if he does that, again, we're maybe having a different conversation. But I think the running game, maybe, the past couple weeks, maybe it's been a little bit of a reality check, especially here, 13 for 36. And we'll be interested to see what they do against Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh's front isn't that bad either, and they maybe could cause some issues next week. I don't want it to turn into this, all right, now the Bills are playing home. It's January. It's playoff football. They're going to really need the running game. I think that would be a mistake to get the flow of this Bills offense continuing in the upward direction.
Yeah, we saw that in the past with Allen. It doesn't matter if it's 25 degrees out. If Allen is in the rhythm like that game against the Patriots a couple of years ago to open the postseason where he was just money the entire game, that's the Bills that's the Bills offense. That's how the Bills have to operate with complementary run game. John, turning point obviously is Deontay Hardy returning that kickoff for a Bills record 96 yards for the touchdown. And I think you were in the Bills locker room. You talked to the guys. I think fans at home, I think anyone watching that game just felt that the tide was turning when Deontay Hardy pulled that off. And it's pretty incredible after all that's gone on this season. Hardy was a healthy scratch, I think, once. The duties were taken away from him. He had a role on offense, and then it kind of disappeared. So it was really cool to see him deliver in a moment like that and really swing this game around.
It was the Eagles game. They called up Andy Isabella from the practice squad, and they made Deontay Hardy a healthy scratch. And because of all the madness from that game, that was actually a talking point that I don't think we even got to on the podcast because of everything else that went down in that game. And it really showed how far down he had gone. And he's a piece that you and I said on this show as we would have podcasts throughout training camp that we liked him. We saw burst. We saw a dynamic ability in terms of playmaking, and we saw that in the passing game. And I know you hate the bubble screens and you hate those types of things, and they tried doing that. Literally, I think it might have even been the first or second play of the entire season against the Jets. And ultimately, he fell out of favor. And I think, again, in just searching for the offensive weapons and how everything can fit, they couldn't find a role for him. And I'll be honest, so I was on the field again shooting highlights for us, and when he caught that ball, I was zoomed in, so I couldn't see exactly, but it looked to me like I saw the end zone. And I'm thinking, I remember being taught, like, you put your heels on the 10, and if you have to go backwards, you don't catch it in terms of punt returns. And he certainly did not do that. And I asked him about it after the game. I said, did you know how deep you were? He goes, no, I kind of blacked out. I kind of was like in this zone. But he said he felt like the punter for Miami, it was such a booming kick that he might have outkicked his coverage, and he was just determined in the moment to make a play. And he kind of found a lane, and I think he said it was Puna Ford, which, again, without me being able to see the whole thing, who got a block on the punter, and he's like, he knew he was gone. But based, again, through my lens, I couldn't see the full play unfolding, but I had a gist of it based on the crowd. And there, I don't know if it was 50-50 Bills fans. I don't know if I'd go that far. But they were loud, and there was a lot of them. And just to hear the roar, honestly, maybe once he hit the 30, 35, 40, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to return this for a touchdown. And as you said, everyone I talked to, Micah Hyde, Deion Dawkins, Trent Sherfield, Khalil Shakir, all of them after the game were like, this was the play that just gave us this boost, this energy that flipped the script for this game. And that's why, one, Sean McDermott and others will say you don't give up on guys. And that's also this just adage of, and Gabe Davis talked to me about it this week, unfortunately getting hurt in this game, but this mentality that it's a coach speak type thing, a cliche of, we just always got to be ready when my number's called. But truly, I mean, even go back to a year ago, Nyheim Hines did nothing for the Bills after being acquired. Then he has those 2 special teams touchdowns in the Patriots game at the end of the year. I mean, these things matter. If you don't have them, you don't win those games. And so Deontay Hardy, do I expect him to be this special teams guy that's going to be changing games throughout the postseason? I don't know. I certainly don't expect him to really do much offensively. But it was a critical moment, a critical play, and one of those that you'll kind of bookmark when looking back on this season and what ended up happening.
Yeah, and that happens. That kind of sparks the offense, John. But what was really impressive to me was what the defense did in the second half of this game. It looked like the Dolphins were unstoppable in the second quarter. It looked like Achane was going to be able to do whatever he wanted to, and then Tua would hit Tyreek Hill whenever they needed to come up with that play. There were a couple of really big 3rd and longs where he gets the ball to Tyreek, and one of them, Hill was in the middle of like 4 Bills defenders, and you scratch your head on how Tyreek comes down with the ball. But then in the second half, they kind of started locking things up and also dealing with injuries throughout this game, John. We can get into that in a bit because other guys had to step in. But overall, what Sean McDermott, the adjustments he made on defense, very impressive to shut out this high-powered Miami attack in the second half of this game, something we saw from the Bills earlier this year in Buffalo, where the second half of the game they really shut Miami down.
You're right. Again, I'll go back to this possession and drive chart here. Miami, interception and punt in the first quarter. Then you're right. Touchdown, 80 net yards, 75 net yards, 9 total first downs, and they just kind of blew down the field. And you're right. It kind of looked like, oh, okay, Achane's breaking loose. That was a guy I was concerned about going into this one, and they just are making plays. The second half, again, when I'm not in front of my computer and looking at the numbers and have the bird's eye view, it's you maybe don't understand exactly what is unfolding. Only drive that the Dolphins had in the third quarter, a 3-and-out. 9 yards, they punted. Fourth quarter, they had 4 possessions. 4 for 11 net yards. They had 2 10-yard penalties, 1 first down. Punt. Next 2, 3-and-out. Punt. And then the last one, 4 plays for 23 net yards. They were aided by a 10-yard penalty, 2 first downs, and it ends with a Taylor Rapp interception. I mean, if you're looking at net yards, 24, 47 yards, net yards total, and 3 first downs. I mean, that's all they had in the second half. That's incredible. And we can touch on the injuries because you're right. Rasul Douglas, the reigning AFC Defensive Player of the Week, he goes down. So he has to come on in there. and it's Dane Jackson. And he made some good plays on the ball, nearly got an interception, I believe. And I mean, this is where, when you talk about the depth, and remember, all right, who's going to be the second corner? Is it going to be Kyer Elam? Is it going to be Dane Jackson? Is it going to be Christian Benford? To have a guy like Dane Jackson who has all the starting experience and is someone you just know that while it stinks with the dynamic playmaking Douglas has made ever since being acquired by Green Bay or from Green Bay, that you can have some faith that Dane Jackson can hold down the fort. And these guys really, really buckling down. And I know you mentioned it on the post-game show, and I think this is a good time to have the conversation. A lot of Sean McDermott hate. We had a whole podcast on it in the bye week. Should Sean McDermott be fired? What is the rationale? Should people be feeling this way? I told you I wasn't there yet. Mm-hmm. And I think for all the people that have thrown darts at Sean McDermott and really rallied to say all the things he doesn't do, I think it would be a disservice to McDermott to not acknowledge what he does do. And he's not perfect, he says it. He'll make some in-game mistakes and things like that. But from the defensive coordinator position, I loved Leslie Frazier. I think he's a great football mind. But in totality, I'm not sure he could have done with this Bills defense, navigating injuries and things like that, gotten them to continue to perform at the levels they have. You know, you talk about the team, are they battle-tested and in a better spot now going into the postseason than in years past? I think the Bills' defense, while you'd love to have Tre'Davious White and certainly love to have Matt Milano, I think this defense, barring, Rasul Douglas being out for an extended period of time, is maybe the best prepared and just layers by layers, depth-wise and everything in between. I think they're in their best position to drive this team through a postseason run than we've seen under Sean McDermott.
Yeah, and I think the jumping off point for me was a lot of credit being given to Joe Brady and what the offense did once he took over for Ken Dorsey and how the offense looked different and started to gel more. But I also go back to that bye week and changes were just made on the offensive side of the ball. And just look, I mean, we were super critical of Sean McDermott. I think I said if he didn't get the team to the postseason, then maybe his job should be on the line. And boy, do I look foolish right now because he really had this defense prepared, and we've seen multiple games where he's made adjustments on the defensive side of the ball and gotten stuff from people like Dane Jackson. Balin Spector today, John, was noticeable when he had to come in and play. And that's Sean McDermott getting these guys ready, making the adjustment, getting them into the spots where they need to be successful, and the guys delivering. I think what Sean McDermott has done this year as a head coach, getting the team to the 2 seed and winning the AFC East, but also taking this defense and making them into a part of the Bills team as a whole. We talk about complementary football. That's been really needed down the stretch to get these final 5 wins to get the Bills into the position they're in.
Bills wouldn't be in the postseason if not for the defense. I mean, countless games that either they carried the torch from start to finish or they held down the fort long enough to allow the offense to scratch and claw their way to anything and allow Josh Allen the time to put on the cape and make some heroic effort late in the game like he did here against the Dolphins. I mean, that's what they've done all season. And you've also seen all of these things that you've asked for in the past from maybe different players, but just the defense as a whole of, can they get to the quarterback with just their front four? Can they have guys that are actual legitimate one-on-one pass rushing threats? And you see Leonard Floyd, double-digit sacks, Ed Oliver with a career year. Daquan Jones was playing the best football of his career prior to that. And then you even see there, right, they insert Poona Ford. He plays well. You just see certain things like that. Then you always ask for from Tremaine Edmonds and the other linebackers of, Matt Milano makes all these plays, but why can't Tremaine Edmonds? Terrell Bernard is an all-pro contender, in my opinion, for the way that he's played. And I think you got to give credit to Tyrell Dodson. And Sean McDermott did going into this game, saying, hey, it wasn't easy. He lost out on the middle linebacker job. Then he was kind of back and forth with Dorian Williams once Milano went down. But he had been a stable force. And then to your point, Balin Spector comes in, and he makes a tackle for a loss, and you see him in there. And then you go to the back end, turning the football over, making plays. Rasul Douglas was doing that. Now you're getting Christian Benford, who is doing that. I think Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are guys that, okay, maybe they're not who they were a couple of years ago when they were all pros. They're still a very, very good top-tier type safety tandem. And then Taylor Rapp is someone that we've been critical of. He hasn't been someone that you thought maybe at the beginning of the season, oh, I mean, do you need Hyde and or Poyer? You could just put in Taylor Rapp, and it hasn't always been gravy. And he comes up with the big play to end this one. So I think the defense as a whole has found ways to be impactful week in and week out. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the play calling changes, maybe some of the aggressiveness that Sean McDermott has brought to the position as the defensive play caller.
I want to go back to Dane Jackson just for a second, because I want to give credit where credit is due, John. I know you were down there on the field. You might not totally know what I'm talking about, but there was a play in the fourth quarter where Dane Jackson got a defensive holding call on Tyreek Hill, and it kept the Dolphins moving a little bit. And at the time, you're like, why is Dane Jackson doing that? But when you go back and look at it, if Dane Jackson doesn't do what he did there and Tyreek catches the ball, you could be looking at a 21-21 ball game. I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. And I could be wrong. I'm no football coach, John, but it just seemed like a smart play by Dane Jackson. You're going to get burnt. Tyreek Hill's going to tie this game up. Hold him, take the penalty, let the Dolphins move a little bit more and regroup. Little things like that are starting to impress me from where the Bills' defense was at the beginning of the year till now. Total faith in the defense that they can get stops at the end of the game right now.
Isn't it funny that if you're thinking, all right, what is the Bills' recipe for success in winning football games? It honestly is, all right, Josh, don't be stupid. Offense, don't turn it over. Just take the opportunities, take the 3 points here and there. The defense will never really allow more than 14, 17, 20 points in a game max. So you just kind of stay within yourself. You're going to be there for taking the opportunities. And of course, you do have one of the best quarterbacks and football players on the planet, and you have a great wide receiver, and you have all these weapons. So you don't need to press offensively. You figure the recipe is just let the defense dominate and the offense not shoot themselves in the foot, and the Bills are just going to probably keep winning. It's kind of the script has flipped of, all right, you know what the offense is going to be, but do you always believe that the defense can get the stops in the postseason against prolific offenses in critical moments? They failed to do that when the offense has kind of carried the can. It feels like this season's a bit of a reversal of roles, which is also encouraging because even though you haven't seen a lot of it this season, you just know in the back of your mind, okay, Josh Allen is an MVP caliber quarterback. He's an all-world talent. Stephon Diggs is an elite guy. Dalton Kincaid is emerging. James Cook was one of the best running backs in football, being a Pro Bowler. That at some point, that train's going to fully get on the tracks. And then if you already have the defense rolling as it has all season, that's where you get back to, could the Bills actually, in a very winnable AFC, and I'd say NFL overall, make a run after a year where many of us counted them out a month and a half ago?
It's like you're in my brain right now, John. I was going to say that when you look at the overall picture of the AFC, yeah, you got the Baltimore Ravens, but I think if the Bills are on their A game and with their defense that they have and their experience against some of these quarterbacks that are in the postseason right now, I think the recipe is there. Just take field goals when you got to take a field goal. Be smart with the football. Don't be dumb. Let the defense take over. And maybe they're in position, John, for a legitimate postseason run. And also, I mean, aside from the 49ers, there's no one impressive in the NFC either. So if somehow someone knocks off the 49ers or whatever, you never know how it's going to play out. I think the Bills right now can hang with everyone. I think the whole idea that they might have missed the playoffs going into the final week of the season was crazy to me. So it all panned out how it should. Starts with the Bills hosting the Steelers, John. You know, you talk to Bills fans at the beginning of the day, and it's like that would be so ideal. But I'm in the camp that I never want to wish for anything because it might backfire on you. But that's a pretty solid matchup for the Bills as they start the postseason. And the other caveat is, John, it's a 1 o'clock game. Someone asked me why the Bills weren't in prime time. I'm like, I think the NFL just realized we can't just keep sticking them there.
I'm looking at the wild card weekend matchups, and you talk about a path that it seems more doable than certainly a month ago, and seems more doable than maybe in years past. I mean, Pittsburgh is the team that you'd want to face. I'm sorry. They're frauds. I've said it. Mike Tomlin is an incredible coach. He's taken terrible teams and wins games and has winning records and never has a losing season and somehow got this team into the postseason. I don't know how, but they're not good. And so the Bills, the way that this season's gone, they'll beat them by 6 points. And that'll be it, and it'll be fine. But then what's really intriguing to me is I guess the weather in Kansas City is supposed to be hellacious. Single-digit temperature, snowstorm, which obviously doesn't bode well for especially a Miami team that wants to throw the football. But I think the Dolphins can beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead because I don't think the Chiefs are that impressive there. And so the outcome, if the Bills would beat the Steelers, would be either they would face the winner of the Cleveland-Houston game, or they would host the Kansas City Chiefs finally for a playoff game in Highmark Stadium. And I think either of those scenarios is good, though I do think Cleveland's going to be a tough out for anyone because of their defense. And then that would set up for Baltimore maybe playing Miami. I know they throttled them here a couple weeks ago if the Dolphins happen to beat the Chiefs, but I think I think that would be a great game. Or if the Cleveland Browns win and the Kansas City Chiefs win next weekend, I think the Cleveland Browns could beat the Baltimore Ravens as well. And then you're looking at the Bills hosting the Browns or hosting the Texans or something in the AFC Championship game. I mean, you don't have to dig too deep into the fantasy land or anything like that to find avenues that are realistic for the Bills to make a legitimate run here. So and again, we've reached the point where it doesn't matter how they do it, and it hasn't been pretty the majority of this season, and it doesn't matter if it's pretty now. If they keep grinding it out as they have through these 5 games and through this season, we could be talking on this podcast about post-game stuff for a little bit longer.
Are you good with the 1 o'clock kickoff? I welcome it.
I mean, so I don't mind 1 o'clock games. I mean, I'm home by 7, 8 o'clock, so that's fine. Like I said, I like the 4:30s because then I can sleep in a little bit. I can go to the gym. I can get some stuff done around the house and still make it to the stadium at a reasonable time. And I'm still then getting home by 11. I've fallen in love with the 4 o'clock home games, 4:30 home games, but I certainly won't complain about 1. I thought for sure if it was Bills-Dolphins again, they'd put them on prime time. But they came out and said, no. Regardless of the outcome, the Bills are playing at 1.
NBC bragging that there's a playoff game you can only get on Peacock has annoyed every football fan I know at every level. The fact that they're on air, I know you were shooting the game, I'll say it again, but there's ads bragging about it. Like history's being made. You want to be a part of history, sign up for the Peacock channel. You have guys like who are older in years. They're not going to do that. All you're doing is taking away a playoff game from the fan base. Between that and the officiating this year has me extremely annoyed at times at the NFL, including earlier this evening or last night when that not calling that penalty on Dawson Knox really had me through the roof on that first drive. And then bragging about Peacock, I couldn't stand it, John. But at any rate, here we go. Bills.
Get off my lawn.
Bills get into the postseason. And I think it's funny. I totally forgot that the Titans beat the Dolphins earlier in the year to give them another loss. And then actually made it so the Bills, even if they lost today, were in the postseason. So the Bills owe the Titans a lot, I think.
Yeah, maybe Sean McDermott sends Mike Vrabel a little, fruit basket or a Michael Scott basket with meats and cheeses and all that stuff, chocolates. A thank you gift, right? And then telling him, but don't come into the division and replace Bill Belichick with the Patriots.
Right, always a possibility. So we got a lot to get to. We'll come back in the middle of the week. Now that we know we're not doing a locker cleanout podcast coming up this week, we are on to the postseason yet again. You got the Steelers visiting the Bills wild card weekend, Sunday at 1 o'clock. Buffalo End Zone postgame show with Fred Jackson comes your way right after. And then John and I join you as usual with our postgame podcast. But again, we'll be coming your way in the middle of the week on a Wednesday. For Jon Scott, I'm Kevin Carroll. As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.